Sit!
Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss Dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
And welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Rich Dotson, here, my fellow nerd, Garret Price.
How's it going?
Not so good. I feel a little like sniffleupicus over here, man. I got the sniffles. The podcast out a day late. Matt's out sick. I got sick yesterday. Sucks because I woke up this morning, like we decided to push the podcast off, and I went to bed like really early yesterday. I got almost 10 hours of sleep. I woke up. I felt great. I felt great all day, too. And then like an hour and a half before we were about to start the podcast, like I started having the same feeling, you know, where your energy goes, your head feels heavy, and then all of a sudden my nose, here it came and started running. So we're going to try and get through this podcast, you and I together. I'm going to try and power through. A little sick Rich this week, but, you know.
It's your flu game. Michael Jordan flu game.
Yeah, here we go. So we got a lot to talk about this week, a lot of Dynasty talk. We're in the thick of it right now, Garrett. You know, this is the hot and heavy season with injuries, bye weeks, and the playoffs not too far around the corner. It's a trade heavy time of the year where this is where you probably get the most value in Dynasty for your veteran players, right? Where
for sure
you're looking at these guys that, you know, usually don't hold a lot of value. Anytime you try and trade them, people are like, listen, that's just not worth it. Where even a guy like Tom Brady in a Superflex is going to hold some more value right now because people are going to try and make that push, whether it be your team was a surprise team into the playoffs, or you had an injury, or your quarterback went down and you're worried about Josh Allen. This is a time to really start to push those trades if you're not a true contender, because you're going to get the most bang for your buck and most likely to actually gather and obtain 23 picks or 24 picks.
No, you're absolutely right. This is, you know, when you look at that life cycle of trading, and we've actually had some of our writers write about this trade life cycle, so it's a common theme, but a lot of average players don't really think about like the strategy aspect of when to trade picks and when to trade players. This is the best if you are wanting to acquire picks, 23 draft capital, 24 capital, heck, even 25 capital. Who cares? If you're wanting to acquire any draft capital, this is the best time of year, because you're absolutely right. You know, in the offseason, would you have been able to get a first and a second in 23 for Derrick Henry? Probably not, but you might be able to now. You know, those are the kind of people get desperate. Their running backs go down. Their quarterbacks go down. We've had a ton of receivers getting hurt lately. We'll talk about it in the injury report stuff here, but it's tough this time of year. And on top of that, you have the bye weeks too. I mean, some of the players that I've had to start on good, legitimate contending teams between bye weeks and injuries are not great, Bob. So yes, you're absolutely right. Perfect time of year to acquire draft capital.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to, like, players that have a limited value window. Definitely these quarterbacks right now where it's such a weird market for the quarterbacks. But guys like Andy Dalton, you know, if Case Keenum gets a start, Taylor Heineke, Davis Mills, like these quarterbacks that really don't hold any value for the future, or any player of that matter, like, that don't hold value for the future. Get what you can, right? Like anything is a swing at the fences is better than no swing at all, right? Like, yeah, it might be a 3rd round pick, it might be a 4th round pick, but you might find a tight end that can help you in 2 years from now. You might find that receiver that might be able to help you out or be a nice dash piece. And more so, these are guys you're most likely want to clear off your roster or roster cloggers. Anybody that's a roster clogger on your team, I mean, now's the time just to clear that space and get what you can. So make sure you're kind of like, just, even if it's a package deal, like you have 3 guys that are legitimate guys that can come in here and help, whether it be their backup running back with a backup quarterback or 3rd string receiver, and you got to package all 3 of those guys together for 1/3, you still want to take that 3rd, because these are guys that are not going to help you long-term. They're not going to help you win a championship, and a 3rd round pick with another 3rd round pick might be enough to get you into the back end of the second that can actually make a difference. So an accumulation of picks will help you jump up in a draft sometimes as well, because during an actual NFL or Dynasty rookie draft, as the draft starts to unfold, when you get to that third round, even the mid-third round, and sometimes the high is the fourth round, low is the fourth round, there's always players or the other teams are like, whoa, I can't believe that guy slipped. And like, that's my guy, right? Like, that's a guy that I can use. And, I know it's 4-1, but I'll give you my third next year for this 4-1 because I want to take a swing at this player. It happens every single year. Definitely in the third round more so than anything else, where there's a guy in the third round. I'm like, hey, I'll give you my 24-second for this third round. And you're talking about 3-4, 3-5, 3-6. And those are trades as well that you can make. And the more draft capital you have, the better off you will be. So it's a fun time to be playing Dynasty Fantasy Football. Unfortunately, the one fun thing is, as the season progresses, we see more and more injuries. So we got to talk about some of those. But before we do, I want to tell you about our friends at PrizePicks. We've been talking about them all year long. That's right, our friends at PrizePicks. It's the one place you can go and the best legal way for player props. You pick 2 to 5 players, the over, under the projections, and you win up to 10 times your entry. I mean, we're looking at plays like this, guys. Kenneth Walker, over, under 75.5 rushing yards. Nick Chubb, over, under 86.5 rushing yards. Cordero Patterson, surprisingly low, 53.5 rushing yards. Deontay Foreman, 53.5 rushing yards. Phillip Walker, 6.5 rushing yards. That's one good run. So if any of those seem like a tasty prop bet to you, then if that's a prop that you like, get over to PrizePicks, enter their promo code NERDS, and you have a chance to win up 10 times your entry. And it's not just NFL. We talk NFL here, but it's MMA, it's golf, it's baseball, it's basketball. If it's got some players on there and they're going to give you some props, it's a way you get in there, mix up your bets, use what you knew best, and win up to 10 times your entry. The number one thing you got to do is use that promo code NERDS so they can match up your deposit up to 100%. Get out there, check them out. PrizePicks, the app, the website. Get in there, promo code NERDS. Let's win some cash. Garrett.
Yes.
Injuries. And we're not talking about the sniffles. We're talking about real injuries.
No, guys that you're going to be missing for the remainder of the season. We had a couple of those guys come through this week. First and foremost, Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas finally starting to have that bounce back, finally starting to look like the guy that we saw not 1, but 2 seasons ago. And now he's hurt again, hurt his toe, done for the year.
Yeah, it's such a shame when you have a player that reaches such a pinnacle height of his career, and then after that, it's like literally nothing to gain. I know you and I did a startup after his phenomenal year, right after that took place, and I took Michael Thomas my first round pick, and I've literally I played him twice since, and that was almost like you said 2.5 years ago. So with Michael Thomas, he's soon to be 30. I mean, in all reality here, Garrett, I mean, Michael Thomas has now entered the phase. If you can get, I mean, what wouldn't you take from Michael Thomas at this point?
That's a great question. I honestly might be at the point where I would take, if it was like 3-1, I might be willing to take it.
Yeah, 3-1 would be interesting in Superflex. And you're right, because I mean, a fourth doesn't count. I mean, you're probably better off. I mean, you're trying
holding and hoping he comes back at that point for one game and then you trade him. But
I mean, but not even that. I mean, even just say you have in your starting lineup anything after like 3, you're right, like 3-1. He probably fits the bill of like, if you're in a super flex league and you want to make that push and you need like a quarterback and you're like, hey, give me something that's gonna give you the rest of the season. We're like, give me like Taylor Heineke, right? Like
Marcus Mariota.
Marcus Mariota. Here's Michael Thomas. Like just somebody to get me through if you're a contender. If you're in rebuild mode, and I mean, good luck because you can't sell him to a contender because he's out for the year. I guess you're just stuck, right? You're like just stuck holding the bag and really just sitting there with Michael Thomas. And like you said, hope he comes back next year. a little bit more healthy. It's going to be hard. I wish Matt was on the show. I'm pretty sure they can get out for Michael Thomas after this year, his contract. I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, we've been saying forever, the moment they can, he's good as gone. Such a shame, such a talent.
Well, and on top of that, we've seen Jarvis Landry miss a lot of time as well. So, I know that they're kind of going back and forth between Dalton and Jameis Winston, and the expected top 2 receivers are gone. It has paved a nice path for Chris Olave to just be awesome this year. So if there's like a silver lining, it's for that young player. But yeah, if you were early on in your season, which I have a couple teams that early on in the season, I was really counting on him to be my wide receiver 3. And he was giving me that and more as far as production goes, but I just can't stay healthy, man.
Yeah, another one we just lost that has not started a good track record of staying healthy is Rashad Bateman. Lisfranc surgery, he's done for the season. Didn't play much last year. He was banged up as well last year. Already an offense that, any receiver that goes in this offense, you take a deep sigh of despair because the passing game just isn't there if your name isn't Mark Andrews.
Right.
And that's, so Rashad Bateman, he's out again for the year. Not a really good way to start your dynasty career. You would almost hope somehow that Lamar Jackson leaves the Ravens, like something happens where they just can't work out that long-term deal and they end up, franchises them, then trading them, and they get a big deal somewhere else. But right now, Rashad Bateman, again, a young prospect that everybody likes. But what's his value in Dynasty? Like, what are you doing with Rashad Bateman, Garrett? Are you excited to have him on your roster? Are you making a move for Rashad Bateman? Or is this another player that you end up drafting that you know the talent's there, but then all of a sudden it turns into situation, and on top of that, injury, just never let it translate into an actionable asset where you can actually put him in your lineup week in and week out?
Well, I'm a big fan overall of talent over situation because we've documented, and this offseason was another excellent example of situations changing rapidly. I mean, we saw superstar receivers go to different teams. We saw quarterbacks on the move. We've seen a lot of different movement in the league. So I'm a big fan of that overall. But if you can't stay healthy, the current situation isn't great. And unless they can get a star quarterback to come in there for Lamar, which my guess is they figure out a way to re-sign him. I think that he ends up back there. It's really tough to let a quarterback the caliber of a Lamar Jackson just go and just walk. So I'm assuming that they're going to figure out a way to make it happen. But if they don't, I mean, who's going to be available to even get in there? I mean, unless they can somehow figure out to finagle Aaron Rodgers or something like that. That's what you're crossing your fingers. But I'm not guessing he's wanting to go to that situation. He's going to want to go to a team that has receivers. He's already been struggling on a team with no receivers. So I don't think that would be the destination for a guy like him. So yeah, it really is unfortunately just one of those situations where I still believe in the player. I still believe in the talent. And as much as I pick that 9 times out of 10 over a situation, that's why I liked Garrett Wilson so much this year, despite the situation with the Jets. Like, good players figure out a way to get it done. But this situation so far has just been such a black hole that it's just really tough to see a bright spot. So I think at this point, you're probably just holding Rashad Bateman because you're not going to get what he's worth. I think you just got to hold him.
Yeah, I'd have you are kind of stuck with hold. I would see what my options were. I saw Matt. I'm in a league with Matt, the Dynasty Nerd Superflex League, and like an hour and a half ago, he traded Deontay Johnson straight up for Rashad Bateman. So that was a trade that just went down like an hour and a half ago between Matt and a league mate. And I would be interested in, making some moves for Rashad Bateman. Definitely, if some team has them and they are in playoff contention like that, like Matt was, and you could offer a receiver that offers some value. Maybe you get Rashad Bateman back, take the gamble that way wise. If I could end up getting like a really high second for Rashad Bateman, I'd be interested in doing that in a Superflex League as well. Draft book capital, because it is a worrisome situation. But yeah, you're probably right. He's probably just another player that you're ending up holding now. And it sucks because now you're holding him for 2 years. And when you look at these guys that are, and for a receiver, if you get 8 years of production, right, like out of that player, and you're holding for 2 years, I mean, you just lost 25% of his overall value, right? Like you just lost it out the window. These windows that we have for fantasy output are so small. So when you have players that start to lose like multiple years, it really does start to affect their overall value because you're just kind of waiting for that window, and that window ends up just getting smaller and smaller and smaller of usage. So, I mean, I really hope Rashad Bateman can bounce back next year. Maybe the Ravens sign Lamar to a long-term contract, and Bateman can end up being the number one receiver on this team, and they can really gel in their third year to go together. I think the biggest concern here, the biggest injury of the week is neither of those two, but it's the Josh Allen injury.
Yeah.
Comes in this week. He's got that UCL sprain in his throwing elbow. And this isn't actually the first time this has happened to Josh Allen. It's actually happened his rookie year as well. Back in 2018, he ended up missing 4 games with that UCL sprain. So now they're saying anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. I'm hoping it's 3 weeks on a selfish standpoint because the Browns play the Bills in Buffalo. I'm going to that game with my family and friends. I really like my Browns to have a chance. But on the other side, I just traded Kyle Pitts and Joe Burrow.
Oh, yeah.
in a Superflex league for Josh Allen. And here I am. So I had to pivot, and I put in the league. I was like, hey man, I'll take any quarterback like that could start because I had no other quarterbacks. It was just Josh Allen. That's it.
Oh no!
And I'm a contender, but Josh Allen. I just don't have another quarterback, but I'm fine because I have good enough players to start in my Superflex spot outside of a quarterback. Sometimes I know people think like, hey, it's a Superflex league, you need a second quarterback. Well, if you have a loaded roster, you do not need a second quarterback. And so I put it out there, and I was, I had people, hey, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. One owner offered me, I was like, I obviously went to the Case Keenum owner. I was like, hey, what do you want for Case Keenum? I'll give you like a 4th, right? Because it's like just 1 game, maybe 2 games of value.
Right.
And he wanted my 24-second. I was like, dude. I told him, I was like, I don't even know how to counter that. Like, that's so far off. And he admitted it was kind of off, but he's like, yeah, I might just hold to see what happens. And in my head, I'm just saying, because I told him, I was like, I know a 4th isn't a lot, but it's again, like kind of what I said at the beginning of the show, right? It's a swing at the ball. It's at least a swing at the ball. Like, take a swing. Like,
I'm surprised he didn't counter with a 3rd. Like, I feel like you might have been able to be talked into a 3rd.
I probably could have been talked into a 3rd. I don't know if I have a 3rd in that league, and I probably could have been talked into a 3rd or a player, but there was other teams out there that offered, like, had players as well. I didn't really care who I got. I was just making offers out there, and it turns out I didn't have to make that trade. I ended up getting Andy Dalton for a 4th and a 5th. I had another offer that I sent out for a 4th, a 5th, and another player, or 2 4ths and a 5th for Jacoby Brissett. When that Andy Dalton trade went down, the Brissett owner's like, man, I just saw your offer and I missed it. I was going to hit accept. So, the one guy ends up holding on to Keenum, which holds literally 0 value in my eyes whatsoever. I was really kind of shocked he wouldn't take a 4th for it, but I ended up getting Andy Dalton, which kind of actually is better for me for literally the same price because Andy Dalton will, now at least if he plays okay, I can actually pair up with Josh Allen when he comes back. But with Josh Allen's injury, there's no long-term concern here. It's just a short window, and we know every wing matters at this point. So, like, if you're up against it, I think the best thing right now is, like, I just mentioned some names. Like, this quarterback market is so bad. There's so many names out there that you can go get for, like, dirt cheap prices, right? Whether it be Davis Mills, Sam Ellinger, Taylor Heineke, Jacoby Brissett, who's only got a couple more games left until Deshaun Watson back is at the starter. Higher end names like Tom Brady that's ended their career. I mean, there's actually quarterbacks out there that you can go get Marcus Mariotas for outside 2nd round picks, essentially. Right. Even Davis Mills. And when I talked to Davis Mills owner He was like, yeah, it's Mills. And I was like, dude, the Texans have like the number 1 pick in the draft right now. Like the odds of Davis Mills being a quarterback, even though he showed signs here and there, he doesn't have a good roster, of being the guy next year are slim to none. They have the number 1 pick. Like they're taking that quarterback. They're getting the guy who they think can take their franchise to the next level. So with Allen, it's kind of more just kind of, it kind of sucks, but I hope he's back next week compared to 2 to 3 weeks.
Well, and to pivot off of what you're talking about, normally I would wait till a little bit later in the show, but talking about quarterbacks that could be had, I'm gonna do my sleeper buy of the week. Sleeper, one of our favorite platforms. It's my personal favorite platform to play on. Fantastic, great with organizing the picks and the chat and all of that in one easy place right on an app. Love Sleeper. And my sleeper buy of the week is, remember when we're doing buys and sells, you want to be, it's easy to say like, buy Justin Fields. Well, as much as Justin Fields is playing incredible, and we'll talk about him in a little bit, it's a bad time to buy Justin Fields. He is more expensive than he has ever been. Now, if you think he can continue to ascend, sure, I get it. But you don't want to buy a player that's on a heater. You want to buy a player that's struggling that you think can bounce back. And that's where I'm at. A quarterback that I think is struggling a little bit, but I think has the opportunity to bounce back. And you could, acquire in order to replace Josh Allen for this week, next week, but will hopefully be on your team a long time. And that's Zach Wilson. Now, I get it. Zach Wilson has not played well, but the aforementioned Justin Fields wasn't playing well. We've seen Trevor Lawrence play pretty poorly and step up. He missed a lot of last season. He was also injured at the beginning of this season. He's just now getting things going. And on top of that, the Jets are winning too many games. If they were at 1 win, 2 wins, they might be in that same spot with Houston where it's like, well, we liked you, Zach Wilson, but we got an opportunity at Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. They're not going to have that opportunity. They've won what? They're 6-3 after beating the Bills this week. They're not going to be able to get a quarterback. So I looked at the Dynasty Nerds Trade Finder. If you go into the GM tool, you can find what trades are actually happening. We can tell you in a vacuum, this player is worth this or this player is worth that. But these are actual trades that have happened. One trade, Zach Wilson in a Superflex league, 2023 second. 2023 second, you get a young quarterback that has some upside. I saw a 2025, so you were talking not 2, but 3 years away for a 2025 fifth. Or 2025 first, 2025 first for Zach Wilson. George Pickens, a receiver with some upside, but I always want a young quarterback over a young receiver with upside because neither one's proven anything yet. So he's somebody that you can get pretty cheap. Chase Claypool straight up for Zach Wilson. This one's Zach Wilson in a 23 first for a 23 first. So I'm assuming it's just somebody moving back in the first round to get Zach Wilson. All that to be said, he's somebody that can be acquired fairly cheap, and he's one of these few guys that could actually be your quarterback, not just for the injury window that Josh Allen has, but long-term. So Zach Wilson, sleeper buy of the week. What do you think, Rich? Am I crazy?
No, not at all. I mean, anytime there's a dip at a young quarterback, it's worth the gamble, even if you strike out a miss. I mean, definitely on a lot of the price tags you just mentioned, because he's got that first-round pedigree. You're right, the Jets are winning. He has not looked good so far this year.
No.
But, I mean, he's still trying to find his feet. I mean, it's so hard. Again, we've been so spoiled these last couple of years about so many players coming in and just hitting the ground running. It's so easy to think, well, that's just the way it's supposed to be. And it's not. I mean, for years and decades, it's always been like 3 years it takes for these guys to come in and learn. So, yeah, I'm buying Zach Wilson if I can for those price tags for sure. I mean, I want to get as many young quarterbacks as I can to have opportunity, not dead-end streets, right? Like I'm looking for that long, winding highway, and it might be windy, and there might be some rough roads ahead, but, I mean, at least the road continues on where right now, if you're looking at a lot of this quarterback situation, there's a lot of dead-end roads that you do not like and a lot of uncertainty. So I think right now, anytime I've ever played Superflex or played fantasy, you want to get as many, if there's any opportunity to get any asset at the quarterback position, you want to have as much of that as possible because for how shallow it is, it's going to even hold more weight down the road because everybody needs a quarterback. Like everybody does. There's just not enough out there right now. to fill all the demands in Superflex leagues. There's not 24 high-quality quarterbacks. I mean, when you look at the top 24 at quarterback, I mean, Matt Ryan is still quarterback 23 on the year. Matt Ryan is quarterback 23 on the year. You know, Carson Wentz is quarterback 22. Jacoby Brissett at 19, not long-term answer there. Mariota, quarterback 11. Tom Brady's at 13. You know, Geno Smith still holding strong at 8. But there's not a lot of guys here that if you're doing a startup in Superflex leagues, you're like, oh, that's a good draft pick. So, yeah, I like the trade, Garrett.
Cool. All right, let's wrap up these other injuries. Most of these, not too much to talk about. Mark Andrews, he was ruled out at the last second this week. Isaiah Likely stepped in, played real nice, got a tutty there. But they're expecting Mark Andrews back this week. It's shoulder, ankle, he's just banged up, but they expect him back soon. Aaron Jones had an ankle injury. They thought it was a lot worse than it was, came back. Looks like he might even have a shot to play this week. So not too bad of news there for Aaron Jones. On the same team, though, Romeo Doubs, ankle injury. He's probably out 4 to 6 weeks. Most teams weren't counting on him, but he was a young player that had some upside. Not looking good. The one that's been the most frustrating so far this season, Keenan Allen, cannot seem to get this hamstring right. You would think over a bye week he would have got healthier. He didn't get healthier over the bye week. Didn't end up playing this week. Questionable again for this week. It's been really, really frustrating for Keenan Allen. I don't have a ton of shares, but on my home league, my favorite team, of course, he's one of my receivers, and I've missed his presence greatly this season.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time, Garrett. I mean, those hamstring injuries are just bad news, definitely for older players. They're just hard to come back from sometimes. They just linger. And it just takes one wrong push, one wrong burst, and then you tweak it again. So, and that's what he did. He said he tried to come back a little bit, and he just came back when he wasn't 100%. And unfortunately, when you have a hamstring injury, you have to literally wait until you're 100%. Not till you're 99, 98. You got to be 100%. Yeah. Because all you do is set yourself back, and that's what Keenan did. And unfortunately, he's probably going to be out for a couple more weeks.
So frustrating. Well, let me tell you real quick before we get into a lot of the things that we are going to discuss today. Let me tell you about Prediction Strike. Prediction Strike, you've been hearing about it on the Dynasty Nerds show for a long time, but have you actually gone on the app? Have you actually gone to the website? Because if you haven't, you're missing out. You get the opportunity to get stocks of these players. Imagine this offseason if you would have decided to say, I'm all in on Geno Smith. I believe he's the guy. You would have made so much money this offseason on Geno Smith. Now, granted, like literally nobody saw that coming, so you're not alone if you didn't see it. But you can go on there, use promo code Dynasty, and you can get a free share of a player. That's right. Go to the website, better yet the app, type in Dynasty. You will get a free share, like a stock, of a player at predictionstrike.com. Now, Rich, we're going to talk a little bit about some of these quarterbacks here. And Tua and these Miami Dolphins are looking fantastic. He's played great, leads the NFL in QBR, and he is third in fantasy points per game on games that he started and finished. We know he had a couple injuries there, the nasty looking concussion, but games he started and finished, 24.98 points per game. How high is he for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, again, we talked about how bad the quarterback market is. Then Tua is just pretty high, and Tua is just lucky to be here, right? This is a team that had a deal in place to acquire Deshaun Watson. And all they told Deshaun Watson to do was to settle all his cases, and he'd have been in Miami Dolphins. The deal and the parameters were set in stone. Deshaun Watson declined to settle his lawsuits. Tua was still there. We found out this offseason that they had a backdoor meeting with Tom Brady, and they were supposed to bring Tom Brady in there. And then Brian Flores gets fired. It all kind of falls apart, and Dolphins lose their first-round pick this year because of talking to Tom Brady. They bring in Mike McDaniel, and Mike McDaniel told Tua on the telephone, hey, I believe in you. And Tua finally got a coach that actually believed in him. and was willing to work with him and work on his strengths and help him be a better player. And then the best thing that's ever happened, could even happen to Tua was not even getting Mike McDaniels, is the Dolphins went out and traded for Tyreek Hill, and who's on a record pace-setting year. And when you got two players like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle that you're throwing the football to, and we talked about this offseason, Garrett, where these are guys you can just throw it to them in the flat, and they're going to make things happen. They could get open at any time. They can make things happen. So the fact that Tua has those two dynamic weapons, the best receiving core in the NFL, it just pushes Tua back up. And Jalen Waddle's there for the next 3 years after this year. Tyreek Hill's there for the next 4 years after this. So there's not a lot of young quarterbacks that you want to that you love, it pushes Tua to the right, to the top, right? That what would you say, second tier of quarterbacks right now in super flex leagues?
Yeah, I think he's in that tier. Would you, we know the biggest names, but where would you be with like Dak or Tua? Who would you rather have?
Dak.
Okay.
It's close. I mean, it's closer than it was like 5 months ago.
Oh, much closer for sure. What about Jalen Hurts? Jalen Hurts or Tua? Because I know you don't really believe fully in Hurts, but he's impressed you this year.
Yeah, listen, I didn't love Hurts long term, but same thing. He's got some really good weapons around him that's kind of elevated his game with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. The Eagles are currently undefeated, so Jalen Hurts isn't going anywhere anytime soon on that team. So I would rather have Jalen Hurts just because his rushing ability would outscore Tua, because Tua's not really a rushing quarterback. So correct. I'll take Jalen Hurts on the ground as well there. So, I mean, I have it's funny you say those guys, because outside of that top tier, which is my top tier guys, are going to be Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, Justin Herbert, then Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts. They got Trevor Lawrence and Dak, and I got Tua right after Dak. So he's quarterback. He's my quarterback 11 right now. So the only person I'd probably like start to consider because of his rushing ability is Justin Fields, is kind of enter that category.
Yeah, I think so too.
Of Tua, I would still take Tua as it stands right now, because I always bet on the bonus passing yards and just like waiting around for rushing yards, what Justin Fields is giving us right now. Right. I'm really excited about Justin Fields long term, because not only is that running game looking good, but that they've changed that playbook since week 6, and he's like started to pass a little better. His deep balls looked really good, which is actually what was one of his best proponents coming out of college, was his deep ball accuracy as well. So I think outside of that, Garrett, I mean, almost once you get to that Tua and Justin Fields mark, right? Like you're at the end of the world. You're at the Kyrie Irving part of the world where it's just a huge drop off. And I mean, you're looking at guys like, and there's guys that I don't hate, like Daniel Jones, Matt Stafford, Russell Wilson. Then there's Zach Wilson's, Jared Goff, like nobody that's really tickling your fancy, right? Nobody's going to help you. Like, this is the guy I need. Which again, goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, if you have a chance to get a good quarterback, take them now, because their value, even in one QB leagues, their value is starting to rise because supply and demand, supply and demand, supply and demand. Yep. And if I have Tua as my QB 11 and Justin Fields is my QB 12, there's nobody after that, Garrett, in Dynasty that I feel really good about, like at all. I mean, if I had Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Matt Stafford, like I'm okay there, but I don't feel good about myself.
Right. No, I get you. I updated the Dynasty GM today, got everything updated for that. So tomorrow is when I'll be updating my personal rankings. But right now, both those players, so it's funny you mentioned Justin Fields, because he's another one, past 4 weeks, 7th, 5th, 3rd, and 1st overall in points. He's been incredible. And yes, a lot of it has been with his legs, but we're seeing some touchdown passes too. I mean, we got 2 alone on my boy Cole Kmet last week. So that's 3 in the past 2 weeks. I don't even know what to do with myself.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a fire. He's averaging 28.3 points per game over the last 4 weeks. again, like I said, they changed their playbook a little bit. He's a dual threat quarterback, so he's actually going to get stuff on the ground. He just set the record for 178 rushing yards. He's looked absolutely fantastic. Cole Kmet is going to benefit from this drastically. I'm really excited what receiving weapon they can give to Justin Fields here this offseason, and where the Bears can go from there. But I mean, the good thing here is like Justin Fields looks like he's finally hit, right? Like he's officially an asset in fantasy football. Like, because there are some question marks. And I mean, Matt hit on the head, right? Like we were talking about earlier, like, hey, they're going to really bring him along slowly here and slowly open the playbook. And we've seen that for the last couple of weeks. They've done exactly what Matt has said they would do. And it's really starting to work. So, I mean, kudos to the coaching staff for doing it and bringing him along the right way and making sure they're actually developing his game and kind of opening up for him where there's so many question marks early. It looks like they know what they're doing there. So, yeah, it's an exciting time. And for Cole Kmet, as much as you love Cole Kmet, as much as we talked him up here, he looks like he's probably the number one option in that receiving offense as well. So that's what you're looking for, the tight end avenue.
Yep.
And for me, if I had Justin Fields, I'd feel really, really good about it.
Yeah, I will be, like I said, I'll be updating my rankings tomorrow. I will be having Tua will crack my top 10 at 10, and then Justin Fields will be 11 for me, and they will be just ahead of Lawrence and Russell Wilson. So that'll be how it'll pan out for me. And honestly, I have Kyler Murray at 9, and both those guys are starting to push Kyler Murray a little bit too. He's another one that I like Kyler, but I don't love what I'm seeing in this offense. I don't know what's going to happen with Kingsbury. So both Tua and Justin Fields, even though they're not quite to that next tier with Kyler and Dak and Deshaun and, those guys, they're not far off. They're, 4 or 5 more good weeks of production like we've been seeing, and they'll enter that tier.
You'd have them ahead of Trevor Lawrence?
I do. Trevor Lawrence so far he hasn't done anything great. I know it's a better year than he had last year.
A way better year. Yeah, I'd kind of disagree.
But he's been a game manager.
But look at his weapons, Garrett. I mean, it's Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. It's kind of hard to open up with those weapons. I know he's got Evan Ingram, but Trevor Lawrence, despite still not really blowing the top off, right? Despite not having any real legit, come on, let's call it as it is. No real legit weapons there. His best weapons is running back in Travis Etienne. He's still quarterback 9 on the year in fantasy overall. Yeah, I mean, it's there
for sure. It's not disrespect to Trevor Lawrence. It's just more. There's just a better ceiling, I think, for the other two right now. And Justin Fields has just as bad of weapons as Trevor Lawrence does. I mean,
yeah.
And I think, have seen, obviously, we've seen Justin Fields' rushing ability. It's incredible. I mean, he set a single game record, but it's only going to even keep getting better as his passing improves and they open up that offense a little bit more and more and more. So, yeah. So for right now, I do. And Tua, that offense is just, you give me that head coach with those receiving weapons. I think it's going to take some time before they get anywhere close to that type of firepower in Jacksonville. And by that point, maybe I'll make the switch him over Tua, but there's just too many good things going on in Dolphin land right now for me to not want Tua a little bit more.
I get that too. I mean, Justin Fields, for how bad he started the season too, he's already at quarterback 7 on the year and skyrocketing. I mean, Tua's in at quarterback 12. He's played 2 games less than Trevor Lawrence. So, they're in that same tier. So I'm not going to, I'm definitely not saying that's like a bad decision. Definitely when you get that safety floor of the rushing game of Justin Fields, it's interesting. It's probably a good spot to be at the back end of a super flex draft, right? To come away with boom quarterbacks. I feel like now, I've always felt in super flex startup drafts, you go quarterback, the opportunity presents itself. Lately, these last couple of years, I felt like you could take that quarterback with your first and then wait a couple rounds to grab 2 quarterbacks because it's been so deep. But more than ever now, if you're at sitting at number 9, you're probably going Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence and comes back and you hope Tua's there, right? Let's get 2 of those guys because in the third, it's just not going to be there. So interesting. It is interesting how like now we're looking at the back end of like these drafts of quarterbacks, like the back ends of like 10, 11, 12, and it's Justin Fields, Tua, Trevor Lawrence, and again, then you hit the Kyrie Irving part of the earth, and that's the end of it. So it's exciting.
True. 100%. On quarterback still, Geno Smith, has he done enough for you that you would give a first round pick in 2023 for Geno?
Listen, I'm going to tell you that if it's a late first and I need a quarterback, I would definitely do it. I don't want to do it, but I think here's the facts. He's 100% worth a first round pick. Like 100%. I mean, the guy's out here playing fantastic football. From a fantasy standpoint, he's quarterback 8 on a year. The Seahawks are probably going to be good enough. They won't be in position to grab a quarterback high. And Geno's playing well enough now that he could probably be the quarterback there for the next 2 to 3 years, right? Well, they try to figure this out. And they have DK Metcalf. They have Tyler Lockett there. They got a great running game in Kenneth Walker. So if you had a quarterback that's going to give you a couple of years, he's probably worth a first. Like, not probably. He is worth a late first. And if you're a contender and you need a quarterback, as much as that smells, like, plug your nose and make the deal, because you're going to get a top 8 fantasy football quarterback is essentially a top 10 overall fantasy football scorer. So that's a championship caliber player. That's somebody who's literally going to take you from making the playoffs and wishing for the best to helping you win a championship. So if you have a chance to acquire Geno Smith, and say your other quarterback was Carson Wentz or Matt Ryan, like somebody you thought you were going to go into the season with to help you carry the load, they're no longer there, then you need to go get a guy like Geno Smith if you can for a 23rd first. And I understand it's not going to feel good doing it, but you're going to feel a lot better at the end of the year holding that championship trophy than you would at the end of 112 making that rookie selection, right? Like, that's why you play the game. And you can't let something as silly as a first-round pick, some prospect or upside player, get in the way if you win a championship. So if you have a Jared Goff, and he's probably a bad example, but if you got a guy in the back end of your roster, a guy that you thought could help you, and it could even be a guy like Russell Wilson, right, that you thought you were locked in,
yep, I
think you should give your first for Geno Smith. And I think he's worth it. And I think the best part about it is, though, Garrett, like, you're not just getting him for this year. You're almost 100% guaranteed to get him for the next probably 2 to maybe 3 years. Maybe it's just next year, and maybe the wheels do fall off, and this is a Cinderella story. But listen, I'm going to ride those ruby red slippers until those heels break. So, yeah, go ahead and get me in those.
I'm 100% in agreement with you here. I do not want to do it. It doesn't feel sexy at all. But I think it's the right move. I think he's proven enough. I think we have a long enough sample size this season. And Pete Carroll has never been a guy that's done things in a conventional way. He drafts a first-round running back, and then he starts the guy that he got in the 7th year before that for several years. He signs a free agent quarterback to a lot of money, and he starts his 3rd-round rookie in Russell Wilson instead. He's never been a guy that's done things conventionally. And conventional wisdom was, this team's going to suck, and you should at least see what you have in Drew Lock. That's what almost everyone said this offseason. He saw something. He believed in Geno Smith, and credit where credit is due. He was 100% right. Geno is the guy. The team has rallied around him, and they look like a playoff team right now. I don't think they were going to go very far, but they look like a team that could make the playoffs right now. So I think it's worth it. I think you will have him for at least this year and next year. Who knows after that? But I think it's worth it to make that kind of move.
You're getting quarterback 8 on the year in total fantasy points. You're getting quarterback 8 on the year in average points per game. It's a great move.
It's a great move. Let's do it. I you know what? We have actually, that's it, Rich. That's all we got.
That's it. All right. I'm actually happy that it's over. I feel terrible.
I would say we actually technically have one more topic, but we're going to push it to the Nerd Herd episode.
I appreciate it. Appreciate you sticking with us, Nerd Herd. Again, if I sound down and out, it's because I am down and out. I just feel worse every minute that goes by here, to be honest with you. My nose is like a broken fire hydrant, I feel like, over here. So appreciate it. We'll be back hopefully with Matt next week. I don't know. He might not be back next week as well. I won't be here the following Tuesday for that Thanksgiving break. I'm heading out of town with family. I'll be gone for the week. So here's everybody staying healthy. Here's everybody inching one step closer to playoffs and making the right moves to get yourself there. We're always here on Twitter. We're always here on Dynasty to help you along the way, and we'll see you next week.
Adios.